Get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from me, the weirdo here at Homesteading Off the Grid. Guys, you have got to get my 6 today. Picked up some really strange stuff on some trail cams here lately, some outdoor cameras, some at night, some during the day. Going to be uploading some footage off and on here in the coming weeks. The cameras seem to be picking up what no one was supposed to have seen. It's the craziest stuff. You know what? We'll be able to get a better view if I get rid of that one limb with my Natiti mini chainsaw. Give me just a second. See that? And you thought this little Natiti 6-inch brushless chainsaw, 21 volt power battery rechargeable operated, that makes an excellently clean cut, was just for medium-sized jobs. Well, today's video is being brought to you in part by that neat little saw. I've got my affiliate link in the description box below, plus a coupon code where you can get this straight from the site with an 8% discount. I want to thank the way more than I imagined of you that's actually already bought one since I made the video about the saws the other day. But listen, this isn't about the saw entirely. I'm here to fulfill some requests and do some things I said I was going to do. A lot of folks have been saying you loved the October nights readings. You missed my stories. You missed me coming out in the woods, trying to see if you can see him, her, it, or they behind me. You miss the Bigfoot Sasquatch stuff, and you miss somebody randomly winning something that I've made in my woodshed, now being made with these. By the way, somebody asked if they were for left-handed people as well, or is there only one of these little trigger things you have to push in to get it to work? There is only one, but I have done many left-handed cuts with this because it's been easier to hold whatever I was cutting with my right hand. You just push it in with your hand. It still works just great. And someone else asked if there was a charger. Yes, there was. I just didn't put it in that demo video because I had it in the house charging. Comes with 2 batteries, and I like that because if I'm working with this one and I use it until it's dead, I just go put the other one in. Plug this one into charge. So if I drain the other one, I got this one. So I don't have any downtime. But I'm doing everything today because of something I was working on. I was trying to watch an instructional video. It's called 20 Minute Santa. Yeah, 2 hours later, I have this. I mean, you can tell what I'm attempting, but it reminded me of a story, and I'm gonna read it to you here today. It's the first story from Bigfoot Sasquatch Files, Volume 14. And before we get to that point, though, we're going to give away a snowman, a wood cookie snowman that I made in the wood shop this week. Made several of these. They are on our Etsy store, link in the description box below. This one, again, if you'll remember, I'm giving stuff away to folks who submit their experiences, their true stories with any and all things paranormal related to the channel. The email address is crazylake@mail.com, crazylake@mail.com. This little snowman is going to be mailed out the first part of the coming week, as today's Sunday, to Nina P. in West by God, Virginia, where, yes, the folks do wear shoes. Nina P. is a very prolific writer. If you've gotten True Hauntings Volume 2, you've seen several of her stories in there. She's already submitted several for Volume 3, which, I don't know, be out sometime before Christmas. Going to have print copies available here tomorrow. Supposed to be tomorrow, Volume 2. Of course, they're on Amazon. But Nina P., I wanted to thank you for 2 things, all your stories. But number 2, Nina is proof in the pudding. Stephen King says, and he's a pretty good writer. You might love him or hate him. The daggone man can write, okay? He says if you want to be a good writer, you only need to do 2 things. You need to read a lot and you need to write a lot. Nina P. is very prolific. She shared with us in an email that Erie sent me after having read it, that Nina talked about how she's loved to read since she was a child. She's now of retirement age. It shows in her writing. I don't know what Nina's highest level of education is. but her work that she submits requires like no editing because it's something she does over and over and over and over, and she's gotten good at it. And folks, that's how we get good at things, by doing them correctly over and over and over. And when we find the mistakes, iron them out, whatnot. So anyway, Nina P, this one's coming to you. If you're out there and you'd like to win a snowman, or I know you don't want that Santa Claus I'm working on, but just stuff I make in my wood shop, submit your true tales with your permission to retell your story either here on the channel or in the True Hunting series, or both. The email address again is crazylake@mail.com. crazylake@mail.com. Now, with no further ado, as my beautiful bride Dearly would say, aka Giggly Girl, I'm going to get on to the story. Again, this is the first story. It's called Real Men Don't Hit Women, originally titled I Know That Weren't No Black Bear, based on real events, very real events. We're sticking with the beta male situation here, the beta male theme, because there's so many surrounding me. But also, you'll remember a video from this summer that's referenced in this story. If you have not been reading this series, the quickest way to get caught up is to get volumes 1 through 10 in this giant anthology from our Etsy store. It's out of print on Amazon, but it is still available in our Etsy store. You can get it in Kindle on Amazon. So, as I read the story, okay, about Bigfoot Sasquatches, potentially, continue to get my 6, watch behind me, because you never know. I mean, there was a camera right here in this vicinity that picked up some really creepy thing. You know what? Let me remove that with my Natitty mini chainsaw, because I want you to be able to see right up in there. All right. I've been using the dickens out of this thing, and I haven't even had to replace the battery yet. It's amazing. Oh, I love it. Again, you can get one from the link in the description box below. I'm now an affiliate of this thing. Yeah, really neat. So here we go. On with the story. Now that all the shameless self-promotion is finished. Real men don't hit women. And it was carving the little Santa thing is what made me think of this story. And I thought, why not come out here and read it and give the folks what they've been saying they wanted since October. There's something moving around back here. I can hear it. So you watch. Well, it was a beautiful October afternoon, the kind that makes life worth a living. And here they came to take me away. And no, I ain't talking about the men with the butterfly nets. I'm talking about real bona fide law enforcement officers. 2 of them. One about a man about my age with considerable experience under his belt, I'd soon find out, and a younger one with a lot of piss and vinegar in him, but not too much else, especially in the way of brains. I was just sitting there on the front porch, whittling away on a stick, trying to make something out of nothing, like that Santa Claus thing. That's why I thought of the story. I wasn't sure quite what. It looked like... There's a blue jay landed above me. Thanks, satchel full of Richards. It looked like there might be a rabbit hiding inside that piece of poplar I was hacking up. It may have been a squirrel. I'm still not too good at this whittling thing yet, obviously. So I figured I'd just keep it going at it, and maybe I'd end up with a beaver at worst. Anyway, I look up, and here come these 2 men. Well, one was a man, but the other, well, he might have been in possession of the proper plumbing, if you know what I mean. But a real man, at least by a real man's standards, he was not. He seemed like a real nervous kind of feller, and he kept reaching back around him and pulling his handcuffs out. And the older feller, he kept stopping and telling him to put him away. Not yet, he kept saying, not yet. Well, I just figured yet was coming, and I didn't feel too good about it. Sorry to bother you, sir, the older of the 2 LEOs said, but we got a report on you, and it's our job to come out here and investigate. We hate to trouble you, but you could make this a whole lot easier on all of us if you'd just be willing to answer a couple of questions for us, and we'd appreciate your honesty. That means if you lie, the younger one said, we're going to haul you in for obstruction. He reached back around his back to grab them cuffs again, but the older feller beside him put his hand on his arm and kept him from it. "He's new," the older feller said. "Please excuse him. And by the way, my name is Officer Grady. This here's Officer Larson." There's footsteps all around me, y'all. Hope you're getting my six. I already knew two things. Number one, I liked Officer Grady. Even if he may have come out here to arrest me for something, what for I didn't right know yet. I liked the way he talked. His accent, frankly, sounded quite similar to mine, and his demeanor was both welcoming and professional. He seemed like the kind of guy that was willing to hear you out and give you the benefit of the doubt, and probably even a pretty fair shake of things as long as you were honest. And number two, I didn't like Officer Larson. Why, he reminded me of one of those little punk-ass insecure nobodies from high school who just couldn't wait to go out and get himself a badge from the police academy and then go back to his hometown and start arresting all the guys that either used to bully him and beat him up or who'd gotten all the girls he'd always fantasized about but who'd never even speak to him because he'd always been such a dweeb. "Well," I says, "I reckon I should probably get me a lawyer before talking to you fellers, but frankly, I can think of better ways to spend my money than just shucking it out to an overpaid doolittle asshole, so I reckon I'll go along to get along, unless, of course, y'all started making me uncomfortable, and, well, at that point, if we get there, I reckon I'll have to do what's best for me." I learned years ago that the right thing to do and the smart thing to do isn't always the same thing to do. I could tell by the look on Officer Grady's face that he was in agreement with this. I could tell by his body language that things might not go as bad after all as I'd first thought. I tell you, that's a right uncomfortable feeling you get when you're just a-sitting on your front porch a-whittling, minding your own, and two LEOs come a-walking up your drive. But I could tell I was building up a real nice rapport with Officer Grady. He smiled at my response, and he started to say something, but that damned Officer Larson whipped his hands back around his back and pulled out those cuffs and started coming toward me, and he says, "Flattery will get you nowhere with us except sin up, you old poacher." "Poacher," I says, wondering what in tarnation he was talking about. Officer Grady grabbed him by the arm and pulled him back and said, "Go sit in a cruiser and do paperwork while I deal with this." "Oh, shucks," Officer Larson said, putting his cuffs back on his belt behind him. He turned around, put his head down, and then he started just slinking back to the cruiser they'd left down there at the end of the driveway. "He's just a pain in the ass," Officer Grady said. "I truly do apologize. He'd actually started out as a small-town cop, but he couldn't keep that job because he'd actually call perps. His force was on the way to arrest and tell them they were coming, and well, by the time the unit would get there, the perps would be gone." "Don't make no sense," I said. "Was he trying to warn his buddies?" "Nope," Officer Grady said. What little bit of authority he'd been given had gone to his head. He just wanted to talk shit, like he was a big boy now, since he'd never known the feeling. Hearing Officer Grady say this confirmed that I'd been right from the get-go about that little shit stain, Officer Larson. Now, I haven't quite explained what type of LEOs these guys that had come a-walking up my drive to arrest me were. They were with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. I reckon you'd call them game wardens. After letting me know that Officer Larson had been a small-town cop flunky, he went on to explain that he, Officer Grady, had transitioned over from the State Police Department about a decade before because his heart had always been in the great outdoors. Like I said, I knew this man, Officer Grady, was a professional from the start. There's quite a great divide between small-town coppers and state police. Takes much higher standards to be a part of the latter. Now, I ain't a-bashing all small-town cops or county mounties, but I'll tell you frankly, they scare the hell out of me. I ain't no pusher of overeducation by any degree, but it's a little terrifying giving that much authority to someone who may have a high school degree at best, and many of whom have been walking around with chips on their shoulders since birth like this shit-stained Larson feller. A state police officer will do his due diligence and make his or her decisions based upon the letter of the law. A small-town cop or even a county mountie will too many times make his or her decisions based upon emotions, which often ain't the positive kind, or they'll make their decisions based upon whether they like you or not. Why, they'll charge you for shit you ain't never done, and I'm talking things that carry felony charges, knowing they'll scare the shit out of you and get you to plea down to a misdemeanor you ain't done neither, and you'll still go off to jail or pay fines and do probation just to avoid getting hit with a felony and running the risk of going off for decades. It's bullying, I tell you, and the law's on their side, so if you ain't got a pile of money laying around so you can lawyer up, what are you supposed to do? Hell, I've known of some of them to whoop up on people and put them in the hospital and claim their victim had started the altercation and then charge them for crimes after whooping up on them. Hell, worse than any of that, they'll straight out shoot and kill you. And you don't have to be an unarmed black man for them to do it neither. No, sir. They don't discriminate. They'll kill you dead regardless of skin color. You just don't see it so much in the news because, well, I reckon those stories don't sell papers. I know his kind all too well, I said to Officer Grady. These insecure little shits, but they're a mite scary when they got a badge and a gun strapped to them. That and there'd make me a little nervous, toting that piece around on his side. You ever watch the Andy Griffith Show growing up? Officer Grady asked me. Well, sure, I said. You remember how Sheriff Taylor only allowed Barney one bullet and he made him carry it in his shirt pocket? Well, sure, I said again. That's that guy, Officer Grady said. Except his one bullet is in my shirt pocket, because I don't trust him no more than you do. Officer Grady actually pulled the bullet in question out of his shirt pocket to show me, and we both had us a good old-fashioned knee-slapping laugh. Look, Officer Grady said, finally getting down to business, the reason we're out here is because we got a few calls claiming you've been baiting wildlife. Baiting wildlife, I said. I guess you'd use that $50 word incredulous here, because that's the tone that was in my voice. Speaking of wildlife, I'm hearing something that may or may not be wildlife. You know what? I gotta cut that one limb down right there with my little Natitty. Y'all liking the story so far? You're gonna love this saw. Comes in multiple colors, comes in pink, comes in purple. They got them on Amazon too. I'll put that link in there for y'all as well. But I'd prefer if you bought it from the Natitty site because I get paid more money and reckon I need it. Got bills. All right, where were we? Baiting wildlife, I said. Incredulous $50 word, etc., etc. Why, I ain't got no need to bait wildlife. Looky over yonder, I said, and I pointed right behind him. He turned around and saw that we had 2 deer, both does, across the drive down there in our fruit orchard, eating on late-season apples that had just fallen. Jonah Golds, they're called, and they're delicious. There was a squirrel up in a pear tree eating pears, and a rabbit was at the edge of the orchard eating grass and just watching the others. Well, Officer Grady said, that small game's not what I'm talking about, or the occasional deer. And I know that technically them coming into your yard to eat the fruit from the trees you planted ain't baiting, but I also know my mama only raised one fool and it wasn't me, it was my brother Robbie. I reckon you planted those fruit trees partly to get the wildlife to come into your yard in case you ever took in mind to do a little legal hunting from your front porch. And well, since that is legal, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I can't write you up for being smart. I appreciate that, Officer Grady. But if that ain't what you're talking about, then what are you talking about? Well, he says, we got a call about you baiting black bears. You'll remember this video from this summer. I don't want to get ahead of myself here now, do I? I had to sit and think for a minute, but when it hit me what he was talking about, why, I threw my head back and laughed just as hard as I had when he'd shown me the bullet of that little punk-ass underling of his. I stuck my arms out in front of me, wrists together, and turned upwards, and I said, take me away, Officer Grady, you got me. I respect your authority and what you do, and I ain't going to lie to you. I have indeed baited a black bear out here, and the evidence is irrefutable. I even have it on film. Now, just wait a minute, he said. I'm willing to give you a chance to explain yourself if, and then he trailed off. We'd heard the door of the cruiser down at the end of the drive slam shut, and we looked that way, and sure enough, here comes that little shit-stained Larson, running up the driveway, one hand behind his back, fumbling for those cuffs, and the other trying to pull his sidearm out of his holster. Knowing Officer Grady had this little shit-stained bullet in his shirt pocket put me at ease, but I'm telling you, this is the kind of LEO that's going to go out there and kill somebody someday, an unarmed black man or not, and give all LEOs an even worse name than they already have due to guys just like him. Get back in the cruiser, dag-nabbit, Officer Grady yelled down the driveway before Larson made it halfway. Officer Larson stopped in his tracks, put his head down again, and once again turned and marched down to the cruiser and got back in and returned to his paperwork. You got the whole thing on video? Officer Grady asked me, and you actually be willing to let me watch it? Well, sure, I said, and I picked up my smartphone, which I'd had sitting on the table beside me, where I had my box of whittling knives a-sitting. I got online and went to YouTube and pulled up a video I'd made months before where I'd shown how I lured a big old black bear named Biggin out of the woods one night and suckered him into digging up a nasty old yellowjacket's nest we had right there at the corner of the porch where it meets up with the side of the house. I suckered him in with a bottle of honey like you would any bear, and I figured enough people had seen it on YouTube that letting one more person, Officer Grady, see it wouldn't hurt. Now, don't go freaking out and thinking that's a ghost. I reckon that's just a raindrop. There we go. I ain't going to tell you something's not what it is if I know what it is. That was a raindrop. But what the hell that thing back there is you've been seeing moving around, they ain't got no idea. Officer Grady took my phone, turned it sideways to make the video a little larger, and he watched all 12 and a half minutes of that video. After the video was over, he looked at me with a look of pure astonishment on his face. He kept that look of astonishment for a full 10 seconds or so, which is a long time when it comes to interaction between humans. And then at the 11th second, the point where one of the other of the two people having a conversation will say anything just to break the uncomfortable silence, he started laughing so hard I was afraid he's going to fall off the porch backwards. "Oh my God," he said, "you're a fucking genius. How in the hell did you figure that out?" "Well, sir," I says, "I just figured if old Davy Crockett could grin down a bear, why, I could go out there and talk one up." He looked at me with a blank expression that didn't last half as long as his last blank expression before he just started laughing again. "You are an absolute genius," he said again. "Well, that ain't what most folks around here call me," I said. "Hell, most around here just think of me as a dumb hillbilly from West Virginia. Hell, my next-door neighbor over there," I said, pointing the only house close to us, "told me so once himself." The houses are spread out pretty good out here in the country. Problem with the one next door was that the man who'd built it was the father of the woman who'd lived here in our house when he built it back in the 1950s or so, and he'd intentionally built it too close to ours so he could watch his grandkids playing out in the yard without having to leave the comfort of his house. That was all well and good until the family all died off and the next generation of homeowners, my generation, us and our neighbors, moved in. "That guy over there told me to my face," I continued, "that no matter where I've been and what I've done, and no matter what I may do in the future, I'll never be anything more than a dumb hillbilly from West Virginia." "Wait a minute," Officer Grady said. "You're originally from West, by God, Virginia?" "Sure am," I said. "And judging by the way you know the state's real name, I'd be willing to bet you might be too." "Damn right I am," Officer Grady told me. He asked me what part of West by God, Virginia I was from, and I told him. He told me where his people were from, which was from an entirely different part of the state as mine, but we still had that hillbilly thing going for us. "And the guy that lives right beside you called you a dumb hillbilly right to your face?" he asked, looking over at the house across the way. "Well, pretty much," I said. "He implied it in that really passive-aggressive, sociopathic way these yuppie beta male types with no backbone do. You know, the smartest guy in the room types who think they're just a little bit smarter than everyone else and that the rest of us are all just too dumb to read between their lines. He actually said it about Chuck Yeager, but I know the message was meant for me. Oh, that asshole neighbor had claimed to have met old Chuck once, but I'm not so sure he ever did. He used to go on and on about having been in the Navy, but he never was. He was an ROTC in college, and I guess his instructor had been a naval officer, so he considered himself to be a veteran, and he goes around telling everyone he is. Hell, the man lies so much, who knows if he was even in ROTC or if he even went to college. I told all this to Officer Grady, and he was in agreement with me. A man that would lie about having served in the United States Armed Forces who hadn't would lie about anything, is what Officer Grady said himself. And you didn't haul off and knock him for a loop? Officer Grady asked, getting back to the man calling me a dumb hillbilly from West Virginia part. I mean, the some bitch couldn't at least put the by God part in there. Never touched him, I said. I gotta ask, he said, how were you able to constrain yourself? Word probably should be restrain. Constrain is what Officer Larson wanted to do to me. I think, who knows, I am just a dumb hillbilly from West by God, Virginia, I reckon. Why, Officer Grady, I said, you know a real man like you and myself would never hit a woman. We both had a good laugh about that. Well, Officer Grady said, once he'd regained his composure, is this the only time you've ever baited a black bear, he asked me. God is my witness, I said, and he believed me not because I'm so convincing, but because he knew it was the truth. The man was good at his job, and I'd say that was largely due to the fact that he was good at reading people. Just something else us dumb hillbillies have in common. Reading others. And knowing the limp dick types who go around making the kind of statements like my neighbor had about me, or, if given the benefit of the doubt, Chuck Yeager, says a hell of a lot more about the folks making a statement than the folks they're making a statement about. Tell you what, Officer Grady said, and he pulled out a piece of paper out of his back pocket and said, I guess we won't be needing this. He ripped the paper up into itty-bitty pieces, and I took it to be that was the report he'd gotten for me baiting the bear. By the way, he said, squinting at one of those now much smaller and more numerous pieces of paper in his hand, out of curiosity, would your dick neighbor's name happen to be, and then he read the name, I won't say it here. Why, it sure is, I said. Why do you ask? But I had reason to believe I already knew. Well, that's the man who called in and filed the report. We both looked at each other and laughed some more. Tell you what I do, Officer Grady said. I can tell you're doing all things above board out here, and what I'd recommend is you just keep on doing it. If these yuppie types can't stand seeing country people out here living country ways, then they can move on back down into the city. Damn busybodies anyway. Further, he continued, I'd recommend you take up a hunting out here legally, that is, if you haven't already. Why, you've got enough land. He paused at this point and did a thorough eye search of my property. And it looks like you've got plenty of safe backdrops for shooting, he continued. I'd harvest as much game out here as I could eat. You don't want to kill nothing you ain't going to eat and let it go to waste just to prove a point, you know. Just to send a message that you're going to do what's within your legal rights to do on your rightfully owned land. Let that lily-footed yuppie watch that through his big old windows and let him make all the calls he wants, because as long as you ain't breaking no laws, ain't nothing anyone can do. Well, I said, I already do that, but I've gone and done you one better. How so, Officer Grady asked. When I go hunting, over here most times, as long as the weather's warm and all, I do it in my boxers to make it even more worth watching for him. Officer Grady looked at me for a hot second, trying to figure out if I was joking or not, and once he realized I wasn't, he and I both fell right back into our maniacal hillbilly laughter. I guess I don't get to use these today, do I? Officer Larson asked. He'd snuck back up out of that cruiser and come on up to join us. He wasn't on the porch. He was just standing off in the yard, holding up those handcuffs like he was going to do something with them. We'd not seen him coming this time because we'd been too busy laughing. Boy, Officer Grady said, turning to address this little shit stain, you ain't never using these ever. Because as soon as we get back to the office, I'm putting you on desk duty for the rest of your life. Officer Grady turned back to me and he stuck his hand out for a shake. I took it and shook, and we both told each other it'd been an honor meeting the other, and it had been, and then those two LEOs went on their way down the driveway, Officer Grady somehow keeping himself from smacking Officer Larson upside the head as they went. I couldn't figure out just how at first Officer Grady kept from smacking holy hell out of that little shit stain as they went down the drive, but I guess, as it turns out, I knew exactly what kept him from doing it. Real men don't hit women. The end. Postscript, because that's not really the end. Give me just a second. You're like, where's the Bigfoot Sasquatch? That's about a bear and a dick nosy neighbor. No, it ain't. You give me a second to read the postscript. All right, you watch up there. Postscript. I reckon I dozed off to sleep for a little while after getting back up on the porch after them two LEOs left, but it wasn't for long. Couldn't have been but a few minutes, because just a few minutes after they left, they came back, and the crunching on the gravel up the driveway woke me up. Officer Grady got out and he came up on the porch. I asked him if he'd forgotten something. He said, nope. I told dumbass in the Vic there I did, but I just wanted to let you know I caught you up in one lie. Now, this got me a little nervous because I couldn't remember what lie I'd told, so it was going to be real hard for me to cover it up. What is it that you think I lied about, I asked. I know that weren't no bear on that video, he said. My literature is sticking together here. Oh, that was deep South accent there, no. Try and keep it Appalachian accent. Oh, I said, and I didn't know how I was going to get out of this one because he was right. I had lied. But if I were to tell him what was really in that video, he might lock me up, and I don't mean in the jailhouse. I mean in the nut house. Don't worry, he said, obviously reading my thoughts written on my face. We know they're real. You do? I said. Yeah, he said. Just do us a favor and don't put too many videos of them on the internet. They are not on the protected species list, and we just figured it would be easier to deal with it if we just kept letting the majority of the people think they don't exist. Okay, I said. How long have you known? Hell, he said, with a light chuckle. They even hid it from me until I saw one myself up on the Skyline Drive my second year on the job. They don't want anyone to know, so just stop putting videos of them on the internet. And it's okay, but as if you just let people think you're crazy for thinking they're real. Yeah, it's okay with us if you just let people keep thinking it's melting. Sounds good to me, I said. With that, we shook again, and he left again, and he stayed gone this time, and I finally got to take my afternoon nap, uninterrupted. So there you have it, folks. Old Biggin, you thought was a bear? Potentially, it was him, her, it, or they. Now remember, y'all, go buy my saw. Links in the description box below. Just to prove it's waterproof, I'm going to run it. Wait, ain't power tools dangerous to play with in the wet, in the water? Just joshing, y'all. I'm just fine, and so's the saw. See you for more next time. Nina P, you got you that awesome little snowman coming to you in the mail. If you got a real story about ghosts or Bigfoot Sasquatch or any of that kind of stuff right there, send it to the channel. crazylake@mail.com. Give us permission to retell it. You'll be in the random drawing to get a random prize I make with my mini chainsaw.